recording. And Dolly, I'm glad you're here. And secondly, I want to apologize. The website on Canvas where I asked you guys to submit your folders, for some reason, it flipped back to the default, which was text entry. Bradley, let me know about that. He emailed me. I kind of fixed it, but it was pretty late. And so it was kind of goofed up, and I don't know why. But I have most of yours. They're not in the way that I thought they would come in because it apparently it shut off and went back to default settings. But at any rate, there are still some I don't have. And if I don't have yours yet, send them as an email attachment. That'll be perfect. I'll get a chance to take a look at them over the weekend. And when we come back on Tuesday, we'll talk about these. Any questions? Well, all right. So if you were a nomadic person, would you say you were Roman? Oh, the laughter. Oh, sorry. Like I say, I did this instead of stand-up comedy. So I want to talk to you guys today about the Roman Empire. And I think that if this goes like the other section, we may not be following the slide list exactly. We'll bounce around, but it'll be on Zoom, it'll be on the media gallery, etc. But that just depends on where the conversation goes today. I got today marked off as Roman Empire and a pretty good chunk of Tuesday. This is big. We have, in some respects, a lot more artifacts and records from this culture, even more than from Greece. And in fact, you can kind of draw a straight line through the Roman Empire to modern day Western civilization. And so anyway, to start off with, this is the Roman Empire at the death of Trajan. We're going to see some Trajan stuff here. And what we have here, you see Northern Africa. Take it, it was Roman. Egypt, much of what we today call the Holy Land, Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, all of this, that was all in the Roman Empire. Of course, as you guys know, probably know, Jesus was from Nazareth, died in Jerusalem. Bottom line, that's right there, under Roman, if you will, occupation. Much of what was the Greek Empire is under the Roman Empire. And you can see this, that's all of this in here, the whole of the Mediterranean. There have been historians that have talked about the Mediterranean Sea as being our lake or the Roman lake, because they had occupied the entire shoreline of this sea. And you can see it stretches into southern, eastern Europe. And there's a couple of places where it just kind of stops, just kind of almost arbitrarily. For instance, this line right here, we got England, modern day England. We call this today Great Britain. You know why we call it Great Britain? What the Romans called it, Britannica, like the Encyclopedia Britannica. And so anyway, but Great Britain's comprised of a number of different states, if you will. Wales, Scotland, England, Ireland. But it draws a line right here because that's the line between Scotland and England. Why is that significant? Well, the Romans occupied England. They didn't occupy Scotland. In Scotland, they come from, they're descendants of the Nordic people from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, etc. So they were fighters. You guys see Braveheart? Ever see that movie? Anyway, it's about William Wallace, who fights for independence from England. It's the war between England and Scotland. Well, that war predated William Wallace. This was during Roman occupation time. This is 2nd century, Common Era. Hadrian's Wall was put up from ocean to ocean, from sea to sea, to keep the Scots from invading England, because that was a Roman territory. Just saying. There's a few other little places too. It stops here pretty much in the Western Germany. They had trouble trying to take over Germany. The Teutonic people were able to maintain their independence from Roman occupation. And it was the only place that Julius Caesar himself actually suffered defeat. So there were places where there were kind of warrior cultures they couldn't overcome. I wanted to talk about this area here. It's modern day Croatia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, etc., the former Yugoslavia, Serbia, and so on, this area. On the other side of the Adriatic, across from Italy. Those are known as the Slavic nations. And guess what? They called it that. The name stuck, but it's where the Romans actually got their slaves. In fact, that's what the word slave in the modern text comes from. This is where they got their servants and things. So anyway, I say that with some pride. My ancestors are Slavic. Just say. But at any rate, this is the Roman Empire, and it was quite expansive and it's very impressive. And it lasted for a pretty good long while. It lasted 1st century BCE, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries Common Era. So here's what Rome looked like in its heyday. And let me just kind of put that there. And so you could see it's well developed. They were builders. And here is a model of what we think Rome looked like during the 4th century Common Era. So this is just like at its height right before it started to decline. The reason it declined, by the way, is that some of those people from Northern Europe and elsewhere started attacking Rome. And they finally, after hundreds of years, actually got in there and caused the downfall. 5th century, late 4th century. Anyway, I digress. There's a couple buildings here that really stand out in this diagram, in this model. Number 17. Colosseum. 16, the Colossus of Nero. And that was, everybody, I don't know if you've heard, how much you guys know about Roman history, but Nero was a really terrible emperor. And he built monuments himself. But this here, this Colosseum, is also called Flavian's Amphitheater. You'll see it listed in the book that way occasionally. And so anyway, this was a big, huge stadium. And over here, Circus Maximus, it's number 2. What the Romans did in their culture, and this is kind of persistent today, how they were able to keep their empire going for so long, there were a couple of reasons. There were actually a number of reasons, but 2 big ones stand out. One is that they kept their population happy and entertained, both in Rome and in the occupied parts of the empire. I showed you England just a moment ago. It's on the far reaches in the north and west of the Roman Empire. Well, they still have places in England that the Romans built, and they're not just Hadrian's Wall. There are these places that are like spas, resorts, English baths is what they call them. Bottom line is that they developed where they occupied. And so they tried to make life better in the occupied empire and at home. And at home, this was kind of the petri dish, the laboratory, if you will, on how to keep a population happy. And so these 2 monumental buildings are dedicated to entertainment. The Colosseum, pure entertainment, has no military, has no political, has no production, any kind of other value other than to entertain the population. Here, Circus Maximus, this is where they did horse racing and chariot racing. Kind of as I might say, this is kind of a stretch, a modern day Daytona Speedway, Talladega, something. This is what this was for them. I had a student in the other section, and he had been there. His parents are archaeologists. And he said that the seating here, and I believe it, was like 400,000 people could be put in this to watch the races. That's incredible. Almost 500,000 people. That's phenomenal. And there are different estimates on how many people the Colosseum would hold. Some people say as much as maybe 80,000. 50,000, but it was on the scale of a modern day sports stadium here today, 21st century. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at it, it kind of looks like a lot of those baseball and football stadiums that were made in the 1960s and 70s. They called them cookie cutter stadiums, but we had one, Bush Stadium 2. Looked pretty much like this. It was modeled on this, but they had one in Cincinnati. They had one in Philadelphia. They had them all over the place, and Pittsburgh, so on. But at any rate, they kept their population happy, and they devoted much of their resources to that end. And so, running through some of this, this is 75 BCE. There are two divisions of Roman history. The first one, rather short-lived, less than 100 years or so. It's called the Roman Republic. Republican Rome. So, what does that mean? Anybody know what the origin of the term Republican is? It's a Greek idea, just like democracy is a Greek idea. And it's from Plato's writings titled The Republic. And a republic is a country that is freestanding, governed by its own people and devoid of outside rule. And so it doesn't really mean that much more than that, but that's kind of a big thing, especially when you think for the thousands of years that foreigners actually ruled all over the place. Take the 18th, 19th century, where the British Empire, they ruled over India, they ruled over Hong Kong, they ruled over big chunks of Africa and the Middle East and so on. It was the British Empire. And that's similar to the Roman Empire. But when we decided in this country, in the United States of America, we decided to have a republic, not run by the King of England or anybody else. The people here govern themselves and they are independent of outside countries. And so that was the Roman Republic. And it kind of fit nicely into the Etruscan culture, which overlaps this. And it fit nicely because really city-states were, in their own way, kind of like republics too. And so when we talk about Republicans and why we have that word in our politics, basically came up in the 19th century, and their first president was Abraham Lincoln, and it was basically a reassertion that we govern ourselves. Benjamin Franklin, in the 18th century, was asked by the King of France, what kind of country is this, America? He said it is a republic. And it was rumored that he said, as long as we can keep it, which meant as long as we don't become a colony of a foreign power. So, republic in Rome. And it's a lot different because they didn't have ambitions for the most part. They basically stayed at home and they emulated the Greeks. And you can see this temple of Fortunus, And it's basically on the Greek bond. Greek columns, Ionic, order, pediment, slope roof, hypostyle, basically has the temple in the back. And in fact, a lot of ways, this is kind of like a mini Parthenon, which a lot of you guys know. And so Temple of Vesta, looking north, still in the Roman Republic era. And what we have here, and this is really kind of important. You see this? This is an archway. And up here, if I have it. I have too many things. Bottom line is that archway is really a Roman invention. And what it does is take all of this, the weight from above this, and distribute it onto a larger area. You do some kind of mathematics to figure this out. You take the weight and spread it over a longer distance, and it can be stronger as such. But at any rate, the early republic, the Roman Republic, was very much independent. This is an amphitheater at Pompeii. Pompeii was part of this Roman Republic city-state alliance. And what happens in Pompeii, you guys know about this, I think, maybe? What happened? Absolutely, yes. Mount Vesuvius, it's one of the biggest volcanic disasters in recorded history. There have been some other ones, but not quite so well documented. But yeah, it buried the whole city of Pompeii under lava and ash. We'll talk about that more, but this is an amphitheater. Again, what I was saying about how they built a lot of stuff for pure entertainment. And so in something like this, they would have things like sporting events, might have theater, actors, staged events, etc. We'll talk about that a little more when we talk. Yes, you gotta, do I have a hand up? Just ask. So anyway, this is, I was talking about the archway. This is how they developed off of this, Roman concrete vaults. And so it's an archway, but it's extended. One of the things, how should I say this? This is Pompeii. I want to see if I can, I was showing this the other day. And where's my screen share? And so anyway, this is the Pompeii website. And this is really kind of cool. It's a big tourist attraction today, just like the Acropolis in Greece. And they have really uncovered a lot of Pompeii. And what they have uncovered is typically pretty pristine because it all got buried at one time. And so they're even finding people that are just kind of like, they're dying, they're, you know, in the pose of what they died, you know, 2,000 years ago. Amazing. And so anyway, this is, you want to buy tickets if you're going to Italy. But it also has a lot of articles and things about Pompeii as well. So let me put this back on the right share. Okay. Got to double check this now. See, that's why I got to double check it. So what? Because it doesn't follow my mouse clicks quite as fast as I thought. So anyway, that's the website. But Pompeii, this is like, you can see what they had built. It was actually quite extensive. It was all buried as 79 AD. And so you're Julia, right? Okay. Just as Julia was saying. And so this is an amphitheater. There's an overview. We know what their houses look like. And one of the things that they did, it has everything to do with climate. And that is that they had like wide open spaces in their houses. So it let in sunlight. It was something that was really big. Didn't have electric lights, didn't have fluorescence, didn't have anything except the sun and candles. And so lighting was an issue and ventilation. And so typical Roman private house, the late Republic, as I was saying. And this is what this looks like from the inside. And this is from Pompeii. And they would have these peristyle, which is the kind of combination of columns and walls. Bottom line. Atrium, that's a Roman word, and that's really what this all comes out of, this kind of architecture. Atrium of the house of the Vetii. There you go. Open areas, open roofs. And we actually got some paintings from Pompeii too that are really kind of cool. And it says Brawl in the Pompeii Amphitheater, which is something we just saw right there. This is a painting of that thing. And this is how it was depicted. And there's a lot of stuff going on here. It looks like there's a riot going on outside, but you can see what's going on inside. And how many of you have seen the movie Gladiator? See all these old movies. I mean, you know, bottom line. Netflix. Anyway, Russell Crowe, Gladiator. Good depiction of what the Romans did for sport in the amphitheater. And that is that they would just have a knockdown, drag out, and they'd use weapons. They'd kill each other. Kind of like WWF on steroids. I mean, you know, really just mean and awful. And so anyway, we know that this goes back to Pompeii. And so another point I want to make is that as they expanded their empire, which was the imperial Rome, which really we kind of credit as being 27 BCE. And what happened is that Republican Rome started going military. Up comes Julius Caesar. He goes out and conquers large areas. Very successful general. Becomes somewhat of a dictator. People say he's grabbing power. They kill him. He's assassinated. He's stabbed to death in the Roman Senate, the steps of the Roman Senate. Anyway, William Shakespeare has a play about that. Bottom line, it's basically from the written record. So anyway, after Caesar, who was killed in 44 BCE, they had what they called a triumvirate, which was Mark Antony, Gaius, and Octavian. I think that's the three. Anyway, three military guys got together. They kind of ruled the country for a decade and a half or so, and then finally one merged, Octavian, who changes his name to Augustus Caesar or Caesar Augustus. And then it becomes the Roman Empire. Caesar Augustus was the emperor during the time of Christ, at least the first half of Christ's life. So anyway, just for context. And so anyway, where the Romans went, they built. And this is in France. I showed you the Roman Empire. It goes up into Southern Europe. 1 to 10, Common Era. This is when Christ was a child. The Romans were building what is essentially Greco-Roman architecture. Again, throughout the empire. They made buildings and they did a lot of things. Probably none more important than this. Doesn't look impressive. You guys know what this is? No? Right. Aqueduct, yes. Perfect. What do they use that for? Water, yes. And a lot of things that we use in modern day English come right out of Latin, right out of the Roman language. And in fact, 3 major European languages are based on Latin, Italian, French, Spanish. Those are called the Romantic languages because they come out of Latin and they are carryovers of the Roman Empire, their occupation. Water. What's so big about water? I'll tell you. You need water to live. If you are from a place that's basically arid, you really know how important water is. But if you take a look at the map and take a look at the civilizations we've seen heretofore, the major cities, the capitals, and the large population centers are typically on rivers. The whole Egyptian empire was built on the Nile, a source of fresh water, and the Nile being one of the largest rivers in the entire world, which provided plenty of water for a long time. Water, essential for human habitation. You got to have water. If you're in a place where you don't have water, what's the name for that? You dry up. Just saying. Dehydration, yes, exactly. And so anyway, this here is an aqueduct. We kind of pull that word apart. Aqua, which is Latin for water. And we still use that word occasionally in various forms, like an aquarium. It's a place where there's water, so you can have fish in the aquarium, this big tank of water. How about bottled water? Aquafina. It's Italian. Aqua, water, fina means fine. Fine water, aquafina. So the duct is another thing. A duct is, it's kind of a noun and it's kind of a verb too. As a noun, it's kind of a pathway. as a verb, it means to pull. So pulling in a pathway, and so it's a duct. We have a lot of ducts actually in our body. We use the term duct because it's the Latin word. But we have ducts in here. We got duct, D-U-C-T. We have them in a ceiling, for instance. We have typically what they call duct work. Not in this room particularly. We got climate control along the wall here, but bottom line is that's what moves the air from the AC unit or the furnace into the home. That's duct work, same word. Pathway to pull. Think about words like conduct, where it's about your own pathway and what you choose to do. How about abduct, where you take something or a person, you abduct a person, you take them from, you pull from, and you pull them in a direction, the pathway. So what does that have to do? This is about moving water. And it's moving water from the Alps, the mountainous area in Central Europe, snow-capped mountains. And there's always fresh water up there. And pulling that water hundreds of miles to a place where people reside. And so this thing up on this hill and on the other side here is kind of more like a moat or something. But when they ran into places like this gorge, they had to move the water across, and they built these large aqueducts. And the water runs across this, takes the water from this side to that side. Secondly, they were such good engineers that they had to keep it going downhill for those hundreds of miles that they moved the water, because it's gravity fed. If you make a mistake on your geometry and you make it uphill, it'll stop. Simply put, you guys know that, you took physics. Bottom line, though, is that they figured that they could get the water to flow the way they want it with just a very small degree of slope. Like 1 or 2 degrees would actually be enough to make that water run the way that you want. And so they could do that over long distances to keep the water flowing. And so this is going from the Alps to southern France, where they could supply the population with water. Fresh water, good, clean, Evian, alpine water, if you will. And so they were really among the first to do something like this, kind of create what you might call an artificial environment. We do that a lot in this day and age. You guys think of any examples where we have large cities where basically they're there because of engineering? Places that would not be habitable otherwise? I know you guys are thinking. Let me give you an example. Las Vegas, Nevada. Middle of the desert. We got this large city because we can, well, basically what we have is Hoover Dam, and we could siphon water out of the Colorado River to supply the water, And the dam actually provides electricity for all of those lights and everything else you see. So with the combination of water and electricity, you can build the city. And that's kind of what the Romans discovered too. And so they were so good at this technology that these were all over Europe. And they ran a lot of aqueducts into Rome itself. And let me kind of show you something here. Yeah, I got a star by this one. Bottom line, this is the Pantheon. We'll talk about this next, but in front is a fountain. Rome was known as the city of fountains. In the US, in this day and age, we call Kansas City the city of fountains because they have a lot of fountains too, but basically supplied by Missouri River. These were supplied by aqueducts. They had so much water they didn't know what to do with it. And so these fountains they had all over Rome, they would do a number of things. One is that they supplied fresh water. And if you needed water, if you would need to do some cooking, you could bring your amphora down to the fountain and get fresh water, dip it out, take it home, cook your rice, whatever. And they decorated these things lavishly, and they did all of these other kind of tricky things that we see in modern day fountains now too, where they have like little cherubs, little angels, and they're spitting out water and things like that. That's what they did in Rome 2,000 years ago. And so anyway, the other thing I want to point out here at this fountain is this. Recognize this thing? An obelisk, absolutely. As I was saying earlier, the French kind of took a whole bunch of them out of Egypt in the late 18th, early 19th century, but the Romans did that too. And they actually, and they made their own, they got some from Egypt itself. And so there is this kind of continuity. I want you to see that Egypt is, it may not be the major military power and it may be under Roman occupation, but it's still a cultural influence. So we're going to see some of what happens in Egypt in the first couple of centuries Common Era as well, because Romans go down there to live. And so anyway, this is one of the iconic, aside from the Colosseum, this is probably the second most noteworthy intact building from the Roman imperial era. So it's in 125 Common Era, Pantheon, another kind of Greco-Roman word. Pan means it goes over a long ways. Theon, it's like belief in God or God exclusively. Like if you were a theist, means you believe in God. If you're a monotheist, it means you believe in one God, or a polytheist, you believe in many gods, and that's what they did. They had many gods, and this was the temple. Over the centuries, it's been used for different things, like a lot of the ancient structures that survived for millennia. But at any rate, this is typical Roman architecture. And you see the front, we have the pediment, we have the columns, we have hypostyle in the front. And if you would take the rest of it away, it would kind of resemble a Greek temple. And so, but what it looks like here, this is a cutaway view. And it has this large circular area behind that Greek style temple. And so including a dome. And The archway that I was talking about turned into the barrel vault, which was an extended archway and developed into a dome. They were people that could actually build this. There were a number of reasons why they could, but I want to take a little time here and just explain that if you look at the Greek culture in total, they were supporters, patrons of the arts. For centuries, the people who ran Greek culture supported the arts. They commissioned these beautiful buildings, but they really put statues all over the place. They put paintings all over the place, and it wasn't just those arts. They did theater, they did literature, they did almost everything that we think about as the arts today. The Greeks excelled at. The Romans, on the other hand, they were probably, they still liked the culture, don't get me wrong. But they had two very important priorities. One was military, the other was building. And so they were fantastic engineers, and they figured out new ways to do things. And so where the Egyptians, Mesopotamians, the Greeks for that matter, when they built things, they had to have a couple of things at hand. First was a quarry, a source of stone where you could carve and extract large pieces of stone. Stone cutting was huge for those cultures for that long a time, thousands of years. The Romans invented concrete. Whether they invented it or not, up for discussion, but they used it. And that opened up a lot of things. They didn't have to have stone cutters. And you could mix it up on site. And we're talking about the water that we were shipping out all over the place. That's a prime ingredient in making concrete. The rest is it's all dry stuff, and you can haul it to wherever you want. It's heavy. Same thing today. You go down to Home Depot, 100-pound sack. Concrete. Bring the wheelbarrow, put the holes in, get some water, mix it up, you got concrete. So the Romans were genius about that. They found out different ways that they could use concrete. And the other thing that they did with this concrete was they figured out that it actually made for a pretty good glue, which is called mortar. And we use that technology today. All of the brick buildings you see today, brick and mortar. We even use the term brick and mortar as opposed to e-tail. You know, it's brick and mortar. That's where it comes from. Bricks. And then you could make the bricks out of clay, which actually kind of, you don't need to quarry at all anymore. And so the Romans figured all of this out, and along the way, they figured out how to do building all over the empire. And so here's the interior of the Pantheon, and you see it's well adorned. And in the walls of this, we have the buried emperors and other important people. And because this had been maintained, it has been in continuous use for 2,000 years almost. There are other people from different centuries buried here. kind of like doubles as a mausoleum as well. Buried in the walls of the Pantheon is the artist Raphael, who died in Common Era 1520, which is a millennia and a half after this. So anyway, I'm saying that, but the oculus, we're talking about the Roman homes and open roofs and atria and so on, open space, and it was for ventilation and for light. Well, this kind of dome with an oculus actually kind of served that same purpose. Get the ventilation through, and as a matter of fact, if you know about how air moves, you'll know that warm air rises. And so the warm air, in theory, would just rise up and it would suck all of the air in and will create ventilation in this building. And it's huge. And the oculus would let in sunlight. So you don't have to have candles all over the place. They did that in the Middle Ages and it didn't turn out well, actually. But this oculus let in sunlight, and then so it lit the place up beautifully. And another aspect of the Pantheon is that this is high enough that when it rains, the water actually dissipates before it hits the floor. It turns into water vapor. The temperature change, the atmospheric change, and the distance just turn it into humidity. So they don't, if they get rain, they don't have to put buckets or anything out here. It's basically tall enough, and the airflow is so well engineered, if you will, that it's impervious to rainstorms. So this is the Pantheon. Let's back up a little bit. The interior of the Great Hall Markets of Trajan. Oh, we see Trajan a lot here. Rome, Italy. And so anyway, you see they have archways. This is all cut out of rock, by the way. But yeah, this is a Roman shopping mall, if you will. And it says the Apollodorus of Damascus, excuse me. That's just the architect who's put this together. But trying to figure out which way am I going here. 34, okay. And so, as I was saying about the domes, morphing out of archways, barrel vault, groin vault, sequenced groin vaults, and then a hemispherical dome with oculus. And so, one of the things that they do as well, they do this all over the empire. They have memorial arches. They build them all over. This one's actually in Rome itself, and it's an early one. It's from 50 Common Era. But you can see the basic idea is still here. And it's basically an archway, and it's a monument. It commemorates something. It's not a place to live. It's just there to memorialize a person or event. And so, I'm going to, as I said, I'll be jumping around here. The archway, there it is. The archway of Trajan. And this is in Benevento, Italy. And again, you got all of this writing up here. It says this is Trajan, and he was a great emperor. And it has Germanico up here. And I think that's because it actually conducted some battles in Central Europe. And you can actually kind of pick out different things up there. And the SPQR, that was the Roman war banner, would always have SPQR. Anyway, bottom line. And you see here, it depicts just like in previous ancient times, right from Mesopotamia, we see those friezes. We see the spiral friezes. We see the Warka base. We see all of this. This is what they do, and this lasts for thousands of years. And they depict events in the rule of Trajan. And so I had a couple of details. Here's the east side of it, and not quite this is the Arch of Titus. This is Trajan. Okay, here, this is the Apollo. I forgot where I have my, there we go. Here's some of the details of the Arch of Titus, the triumph of Titus. And see, there he is. He's in his chariots, got his horses. And again, they still end up putting in some of these mythical beasts. We've seen that since the beginning of time. And we see that throughout the Roman era too. We saw it in the Etruscan era. We know about the Minotaurs in the Anubis and so on. And so anyway, this is the spoils of Jerusalem. You can see that we have menorah here. Occupying armies taking over Judaic lands. Almost always take the menorah with them. Anybody know why? It's typically made of gold. Not a religious thing. And so anyway, those archways, I just looked this up. Triumphal arches. And they're all over the world. I showed you with the Arc de Triomphe in France, and I didn't put that back on here. But the Arc de Triomphe of France, where we have the Nazi troops marching through in 1940 and in 1944, the American troops marched through because they just defeated. It's like, we've been living this way. We've been doing these things for millennia. It goes back thousands of years. Another thing that the Romans did was they built these columns, memorial columns. And this is the column of Trajan, and it's in Rome, and it was dedicated in 112 Common Era. And as you can see, it's got the spiral frieze. And up on its capital here, we have a statue cast bronze. How do we know it's bronze? I think bronze. He's just telling. Because it's green. And bronze is tin plus copper. It's an amalgam. And the copper oxidizes green. Maybe you've ever seen a statue of them. Well, how about Bismarck? I saw you shaking your head. Yes, you saw the Statue of Liberty. Oh, okay. What color is it? Green. Yeah, it's because they use sheets of copper alloy to make this thing. They had metal smithers and they were bending these things. And it would put built it in pieces and shipped it over on a boat and reconstructed it. But yeah, it's green because of copper. So that's kind of the dead giveaway. And so these columns, the column of Trajan, and here's some of that detail on the spiral frieze. And again, it's about Trajan and his heroism and the naval battles and other battles. And just like in ancient times, you know, you'll find these things that will praise the prosperity of Rome under Trajan's rule. So you have these things just like you'd find in a pharaoh's tomb, harvesting wheat, for example, and livestock and stuff. That's prosperity. That is so much the measure of prosperity, that you have plenty to eat. You got the buildings and everything else. And so there's a detail, another detail, battle and its aftermath. And so got some dead bodies going on here. Still got some people fighting. Got the shields. Got war. Wounded Romans. See, and they would spell out, just like I say, today we know how to look at graphic novels. You know, you kind of go up in the upper left, and then you move right, then you go down, then you move. And so you know in what sequence those pictures should be seen. Well, that was kind of the same thing with the spiral frieze, you know, we just kind of keep telling a story in a chronological order. And so, yeah, detail of construction. That was big. See over here too, there's those bricks. I was brick and mortar, what I was talking about. You see, a lot of this is symbolism, I'm sure, but we've got these people carrying buckets of water, which is probably there to create the mortar to put the bricks together. And again, put Trajan columns, search out on Google Images, and again, these are like all over the world, and you can just see that in some cases this and this is the same place, but a lot of them are from all over the world. And so yeah, they gave us a lot, and I haven't even talked about the painting or this, the Colosseum salute. And so what time is it? It's 5 after. Let me just tell you a couple of things about this before we go. It's still standing. It's in pretty poor shape. And like a lot of these sites of antiquity, you can go buy tickets and go inside and see it. But you can see the Roman archways. You can see the faux, which is fake, columns on the outside for decoration. And again, like I said a moment ago about how this kind of becomes the model for stadiums or stadia all over the world. They kind of build them in the same way, and they're tiered, and they have a kind of a stair step seating so that everybody can see what's going on. This was actually quite elaborate in that we know this because the bottom line is that it had this floor, which would be like the playing field, but underneath they had all kinds of tunnels and rooms and access points and different kinds of things going on underneath the playing field. And I call it the playing field. It's the center of activity. And so they could do things like make a door pop up and have a lion come out, you know, right, seemingly right out of the ground. And so anyway, they would stage all kinds of things there. They were able to seal this off and fill it up with water and have mock naval battles. They move a couple of warships in here. They would actually fight it out, just like if it were a sea naval battle, complete with hot oil and fire and all kinds. And so as time went on, the entertainment became more gruesome, and that's been recorded. And I don't know how many of you have been exposed to this, but what they did was that they started executing people for sport, political prisoners there. And I told you about the gladiators, which was kind of like WWF, except for with actual weapons and fight to the death. See, they did fight Roman gladiators one against the other, and that was enough. And then it got to where they fought to the death, and then they were actually gathering up so-called enemies of the state. A lot of early Christians were thrown in there. They'd let the lions out, let the lions eat the Christians. So it turned into a very gruesome and grotesque legacy for this place. But it wasn't all that. But there was enough of this that happened in the Colosseum. And that is that when Christians for centuries would go to Rome, oftentimes they would pick up a handful of sand and take it home with them. Because as they figured that it had the blood of the early Christians on those grains of sand. And so anyway, another aspect of this I want to point out, this recent discovery. They figured out that this was the first stadium with a retractable roof. It wasn't retractable, say, like Miller Park in Milwaukee or Bank One in Arizona or those kinds of places. It was done with cloth. And they figured this out, that this actually did work. It actually happened. And it was a kind of a sheer cloth, sheer meaning that light would pass through it. So when they put the roof up, it didn't go completely dark. It was pulled out with a system of pulleys and ropes, but it had an artificial roof. And not unlike the kinds of things that we do today. We don't have one here, but a lot of big cities, Houston, Indianapolis. Anyway, bottom line, you know what I'm talking about, sporting venues with retractable roofs. And that, if there's no questions. I got a question. Are you guys going to have a good weekend? Yeah, good. Good attitude, good answer. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. And show and maybe